Hi guys, so today I'm going to do a really fun, lengthy video, so yeah, probably grab some snacks if you'd like. I can imagine this being quite a while long. Anyway, it is my Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy review of all the books that I have, which is pretty much all of them except for the 6th, which is not by Douglas Adams, but I might explain that later if I remember. Anyway, so I'm assuming all of you are here because you have read the books, so I am going to be going into spoilery thoughts most likely, so please do not watch if you haven't read any of the books. Of course, watch if you haven't read but you're still interested in hearing my thoughts and you don't care about spoilers, you know, carry on watching, that's your own prerogative. But I wouldn't recommend that. So I'm not going to be talking about too much about the plot because, as I've already said, I assume you guys know what each individual book is about. So let's go into my thoughts and stuff. So the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy by Douglas Adams is a trilogy of 5. So there's 5 books in the story. Apparently Douglas Adams had intended for maybe more in that world, but I think maybe he died before that was possible to create. But authors since have been inspired by his work and have done kind of like tribute pieces for him, again, which I'll explain a bit later. So the first book is The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. So in this book we're introduced to Arthur Dent and his friend Ford Prefect. I always want to say perfect. Literally seconds before the Earth is destroyed. You all know the ins and outs about that. We see Arthur stumbling to come to terms with this, you know, extensive galaxy. He didn't really think too much about there being any more than the Earth, you know, he wasn't really thinking about it. Why would you really, in your everyday life? So on his journeys he meets characters like Zaphod and Trillian and a load of other crazy people, so I guess that's kind of like the basis for the plot in general. This book actually got me really hooked in the series. I don't know what it was about it that made me fall in love. It was just such a random, wonderful adventure. I was just sucked in from the get-go. I loved how, even though this book was kind of an introduction to the characters, they still had, I guess, kind of depth to them. They were just so witty in their humour. It's like they bounced off of one another in their dialogue. It was just like I was watching like something rather than reading. It was like visually playing in my mind, and that was awesome. So I think that definitely gave me the experience that I wanted. You know, it gave me kind of more of a visual experience, and whenever I can visualise something in a book, I know it's going to be a good one. Something about the way it's written, I found that it was very randomised. Like it would go from one chapter to another, but within the chapter you'd think they didn't link, but in some way, somehow, eventually you'd realise, oh, it does link because of that and that. So that was really cool, but you had to kind of pay attention if you wanted to see the very like tiny linkage, the very tiny links, like the very tiny details. But I mean, even though it was randomised and it felt jumpy, this particular book, it still kept me engrossed. I wasn't getting distracted, I wasn't getting overly confused as to think what's going on, I don't know where I am in my story. You know, it did keep the flow going, even though it was so, I guess, patchy in how it was organised. The structure was very strange. I honestly thought that it was such an amazing instalment, and I ended up giving it 4 stars because of that. I just think that being the first book, it really did grip me, and it made me want to carry on. Okay, and then we have the restaurant at the end of the universe, which is the second in this trilogy of 5. To be honest, this one I don't really know, like, I don't really remember too much about, and I think that shows in the rating I gave it as well, because I did end up giving it a 2-star. I know, a drastic like 2-star deduction from the first book, but there was something, I think what happened, and I mentioned this in my Goodreads review as well if any of you have read that, I was in a setting in a hospital where I wasn't in the best mind frame, I guess, and I think that negativity that I had there, nothing bad was happening, I was just waiting, and I was anxious and irritated and stuff like that. So I think having that mindset kind of made me feel annoyed at the book as well. It wasn't the right time for me to be reading something so, as I mentioned earlier, random, and because of that, and because of how I was feeling reading it, I was picking holes, and I was really seeing how unstructured I felt it to be. I don't know if that's the case. Maybe if I read it again in the future, away from that environment, it might not be. And I was hoping when I got out of the hospital and carried on reading, maybe it would feel different, but I still had that air of irritance over the whole thing. It still had its charm, it still had its wit, it just didn't keep me, you know, sucked in as much as the other book. It didn't entertain me as much, and I was really disappointed because I was hoping to enjoy all of the books, all in the series, like equally, or I don't know, maybe a little bit more than others, but this one really fell for me, and I was really shocked because, as I said, I was hoping for a lot of stuff just from the awesomeness of the first book and how this is one of those kind of sci-fi classics that everyone loves and everyone's read, you know. Yeah, I also found myself in this particular story to be detached from the characters and the situations of what were going on. I didn't feel like there was any progression with the characters individually and as a team. There wasn't enough growth, and there just wasn't enough development for, you know, the worlds that were going on. I mean, I just remember myself vaguely kind of skimming, not exactly skimming, I mean I was reading the words, but I don't remember, like if you asked me now I really wouldn't remember exactly what that book was about. So I guess either it could have been just a filler, so not really much going on, or it was just my state of mind at that moment in time, you know, and I think it had that negative impact for the whole duration, unfortunately. Let me know if I should just randomly read it again in the future just to see if I have any, you know, different feelings in a different mindset, if that makes sense. But yeah, unfortunately I gave that one 2 stars. Okay, and then we have the third book, which is Life, the Universe and Everything. Well, I am whizzing through these books. I thought it was going to take much longer than this. Anyway, this got 1 extra star, so I gave it 3 stars. Obviously, I enjoyed it a little bit more than the last book, but not as much as the first book. Here, we're introduced to this awesome new world. This is the world of cricket, and this is where things get like a little bit more batshit insane. If it wasn't crazy to begin with, you know, it's getting a bit scary now, because we've already seen one world, Earth, being destroyed, and now we're seeing like this crazy like warrior realm. Just having in mind, you know what, I want to destroy everything else. I don't want anything else around me but our world. It's insane. Of course, in this one as well, Arthur's learning how to fly. That's amazing. That was totally random. I wasn't expecting that. I was just thinking, what the hell, what else are they going to throw into this book? I loved it. This was actually great. Even though I gave it a 3 stars, I mean, I did enjoy it. 3 stars for me is a good book, you know. But I will say though, I dived into this one straight after reading Alice's Adventures in Wonderland, and that probably wasn't the best idea, going from one crazy book to another crazy book. Both very nonsensical in their themes and just, you know, the structure in their books entirely. From this point I was really noticing, I mean it changed after a while, but from this point I noticed that each book so far I felt I could comfortably read them as standalones, like on their own, or maybe, you know, read one year, read the next year. I feel like they worked well as their own book, you know, nothing as a follow-up, nothing, because they all have kind of a different little focus storyline as it goes through, if that makes sense. Or in my opinion, I felt like they did anyway. Definitely found it more interesting than the restaurant at the end of the universe, but as I said, not as interesting, or not as enjoyable, should I say, as the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, the first one. So I found myself thinking, you know what, because I was kind of getting a little bit into that slump of where even though I read a book in between the second and this third book, I was still in that mindset like, oh, I didn't enjoy that one that much, I really want to enjoy this one, but will I? So I kind of put into my head that if I think of it as like a bizarro kind of genre, that it doesn't have to make sense, that it can be as crazy as it wants, that is what it's trying to do, then I enjoyed it much more than I was expecting to. And I think because I did that kind of lifted my mood a little bit. It lifted the cloud, like the miserable rain cloud that I had over my head that lingered a little bit from the second book, you know. So I did have a much more pleasant experience reading this one. I did enjoy it a lot more. As you can see in my rating, I gave it an extra star, I gave it 3 stars. So that put me on the right track again to enjoying the series. I really like the fact that, again, I've got to mention that we jump around a lot, even though it diminishes the structure. Well, I guess it makes it its own structure, to be honest, but even though it kind of decreases a structured, you know, story, I feel like it mirrors how I'd perceive time and space to be, like kind of just random segments. If you was to travel, I'd feel like I am reading how you would travel space and time. Do you know what I mean? Like, that's really strange. But I kind of had like this epiphany as I was reading. I was like, wow, is time and space travel really like this? Like all spacey and jumping around? You know, I'd imagine that. I don't know why I really would. Maybe it's too much Doctor Who. I don't know. Again, this was a big one for me, realising that as events were happening in one chapter, you'd forget about them for a little bit and you think that's got nothing to do with this. And then it'd pop up again at the last minute and you'd be like, whoa, okay, that has got something to do with it. Glad I remembered that, glad I spotted that, you know. And so it's just kind of a nice feeling to feel like you almost put 2 and 2 together and you're like, whoa, I figured that out, that's cool. Or it could be just the slightest thing. What was it? I think they mentioned cricket in passing at the very beginning, about that world. And I thought nothing of it. I thought, what a random paragraph. Why would you start with something we're not even talking about? And then it went into like Arthur Dent or something like that. And then later on, like midway through the book, it was kind of warming up to it, and I think they wasn't saying the planet's name, and I was like, hold on, this is reminiscent of something. And then I realised, oh, it's cricket, and then there was more about it, and then it was obvious that they were talking about it, and they were saying the name and stuff, and I was like, that's so freaking cool. I really loved it. So yeah, that one got 3 stars for me. Really enjoyed that one. It was great fun. Now on to the 4th book. This one is So Long and Thanks for the Fish. I think this one was a little bit more awakening, processed, a bit more thoughtful in terms of what it was about. I do think that this was the story that apparently, from like reading the foreword and stuff, Douglas Adams had to be locked into a hotel room to write it as an actual novel, because Neil Gaiman mentions in the foreword, I'll talk a bit more about forewords and stuff at the end of the video, but or near the end, but he was saying how Douglas Adams doesn't really write novels. He just writes, and then apparently this one was one where it was actually novelised. He was actually making a story, you know, with you know, a beginning, middle and an end. So I can actually, even before I read that, because Gaiman did say not to read it until after, if you've never read it before, because it had spoilers in it, but I could feel it felt more structured, more, and I mean, I liked it, but it wasn't what I was used to. I wasn't expecting it to be like that, obviously, having read the first 3 books. I was like, okay, it's crazy, it's a crazy book, this is what the series is going to be like. But this one was more structured. It was still crazy insane, but it felt more like a story, you know, a novel. I think if the first book wasn't my favourite, this would have been my favourite. And from this book to the last book, it has more of a melancholy feel to it. I mean, Arthur Dent's randomly found himself, you know, back on Earth, and he's at first he's a little freaked out. He's like, well, why, like, the Earth got destroyed in order for that hyperpass or bypass, whatever it's called. How am I here? You know, and I think that drove him a little bit crazy, you know, racking his mind over what's going on. And then he kind of got used to living his normal day-to-day life again, you know, being Arthur Dent, having his cup of tea and everything like that. But then he realises he can still fly, and it's just amazing. And of course, he meets a girl, doesn't he? Whose name I can't remember at the moment. It was definitely a romance book. And I didn't go into this series expecting any romance. I didn't really want romance from it, but it was done in a way that I appreciated. It wasn't completely thrown in your face. It wasn't completely lovey-dovey. It made you see Arthur Dent in a complete different light. Like, you saw that he can be emotional. You saw that he was just like a normal human being that's been through so many crazy adventures, like through hell and back, pretty much, you know. And he still has that romantic side to him, that loving side to him, and that was amazing to see. And I say it brings us more to the melancholy aspect, because obviously it leads into the 5th book, which is, you know, he finds out he has a kid and everything, and I just feel like it's a little bit depressing, but this one is warming us up to that. It's showing us the softer side of characters. It's showing us that some characters, you know, do get upset when you think they almost don't have that. And I keep bouncing around and like throwing in random bits, but that's how my thoughts are, and I think that's how this book is presented. But in saying that, you know, how everything I've mentioned has been about how like kind of scatty the book is, how inconsistent but in a good way it is. Well, this 4th book I just felt really had plot. As I was saying, it felt more novelised. I could really see a development in plot here, even if it didn't necessarily directly continue with things. It was like a new story in itself. It was nice, and it kind of made me feel more things in the final book because of this. So in a way, I can see it as almost like a filler leading up to the final book, but it is its own story in itself, and it makes me feel more of an emotional attachment to certain characters. It still kept its humour. I think this was one of the books, I don't know if any more did it, but this is the one I remember actually making me physically laugh out loud in public places. I was getting strange looks and everything. Like, this is the one that I was actually really laughing at too. And yeah, I mean, if it makes me laugh out loud, then it's got to be a good book. I mean, only if it's supposed to make you laugh, of course. If it's something that's badly written and it's making you laugh, you've got to think twice about what you're reading, I suppose. Now, if I was to have one major flaw with this story, with So Long and Thanks for the Fish, it is this specific jumping around in this story. And I mean, before I've been fine with it. I've been fine with the random kind of, this is an event, this is another event, and somehow it links, you know. But in this one, because it felt so much more like an actual novel, that's what left me confused. That was the downfall for it. A lot of scenes I felt were completely random and just seemed to happen without any kind of explanation, no sort of rhyme or reason to it. It did leave me feeling extremely confused because I just couldn't see any kind of links that I'd been able to see in previous books. It was just, this is a random scene, this is another random scene, there's a break there, there's no chain, there's nothing to link it to the next thing, you know, it just happened, which is upsetting because other than that it was an awesome book. I really enjoyed it, and as I said, it would have been my favourite if the first book wasn't my favourite. Also, characters, right, so the girl that Arthur meets and, you know, falls in love with, that was awesome. Again, that's the specific reason for the time jumping. I didn't understand how many days, weeks, months, years had passed with their relationship. One minute they were like, well, Arthur was kind of like stalking her, the next minute, oh, Fenchurch, that's her name, the next minute they were living together or like going to each, I don't know, something was happening, and then Ford arrived and everything went to pot. But yeah, that was, I did really like Fenchurch. I would have liked more explanation then with their relationship, like how long things were, as I said, but other than that I really did enjoy their relationship. It wasn't in your face, it was just nice. And then I liked the return of Ford. He seemed more broken, I don't know, just the way his lines were and his characterisation. I felt like he was more timid than usual. And then Marvin, oh, I loved that he made an appearance. It's been so long since we've had him, and just when I thought I was being lied to, he was there. But obviously he died, and that just made me sad. But he was sarcastic until the very last breath. But robots don't breathe, but you know, he was huffing and puffing and sighing all the time, so let's just say breath. The ending was definitely satisfying enough for this book, but I don't think this could have been read on as a standalone. Like, you couldn't just pick up this fourth book and be like, oh, what's going on? Because I think you do need to have some kind of background to the characters that you're meeting, you know. I think a lot of the stories running up to this one gave you more of a character development in a sense, so you knew, I don't know, even though Arthur I felt was so different, like you saw a different side to him, I feel like you needed to know him beforehand to appreciate this new side of, like, you know, the softness and all that sort of stuff. But yeah, I really did like this one, and I gave So Long and Thanks for the Fish a 4 stars, so, you know, it's on par with the first book. And for the last book, which is Mostly Harmless, book 5, oh my god, I can't believe it was the end. I really don't. Missed out on that 4 stars though. I gave it a 3 star. Maybe I was just being bitter because it was finishing. No, I wasn't. But this is the one where, if you think about it, it's really depressing. This is the one where I gave it a 3.5 stars. So it missed out a little bit on the 4 mark, but I don't know, something was holding me back just a little bit. And as I was reading this one, I kind of had the notion that this is, like, reading it, the way the words are structured, it's like, this is a David Attenborough documentary, the way I'm reading it, especially when it was inserts from the Hitchhiker's Guide. It just felt like I was, I don't know, reading a script, like a sarcastic script of David Attenborough's documentaries. Oh, I loved it. But yeah, the interchanging chapters with Arthur, Ford and Trillian was awesome. I love to see how they grew, like, individually and what they were all getting up to. Trillian I liked a lot, actually, because we didn't see too much about it. Even when we was, like, in the first book and she was on the ship and everything, I feel like she's been a bit, I guess, a dark horse, because I didn't really know too much about her, and in the very beginning I feel like she was a little bit annoying. Not annoying, but I was a bit cold towards her as a character. But in this one, I don't know, she's got something. I liked her. I think that the interchanging chapters, like the alternate chapters between the 3, gave more, I guess, of an impact to what happened at the end. You know, with what was it? It turned out that Arthur was in that place where he'd supposedly got this same little creature to die all these times, and oh, that was amazing. As I was realising that, I was like, oh crap, he's in that Strato place, you know what I'm talking about, and I'm like, oh no. But I was expecting it to end there, but there was a little bit afterwards, wasn't there? I can't remember exactly what happened, but there was a little bit, and I could have been happy with just that ending. I mean, I would have been a bit annoyed because I wanted more, but that would have been a good, more wanting ending, if that makes sense, but not really being a cliffhanger. This one, I feel like the gentler sides were really shown, especially when it came to, because we saw a few different trillions, didn't we, kind of in different times and spaces. When it came to her not knowing Random, who I'll talk about in a second, but wanting to help, you know, bringing her to Arthur and that, and then the other trillion at the top of the stairs in that Strato place, that club or whatever, that was emotional, because she was like crying. She was like, I don't know you, I've never met you in my life, and then she still wanted to help her. And yeah, Random as a character, didn't see too much of her, but I couldn't stand what I saw. She was irritating, so irritating, so, I don't even know, like, needlessly breaking things. But in a way, if you think about it, I can understand why she was like that. It's because she wanted to find her place in the galaxy, pretty much, not just in, you know, the world, the galaxy. She didn't feel like she actually had a home. She wanted to go back to Earth. She wanted to think, oh, this is where I belong, but she didn't even feel like she belonged there, and that was actually quite heartbreaking, because, you know, she's only a young girl, however old she is, and that was sad. She didn't feel like she belonged with her mum or her dad, and then there was this different version of her mum that didn't even know her, and that must have put a whole load of depression onto her even more. So I mean, I can see why she acted in some of the ways she did, but overall I didn't like her. I didn't bond very well with that character. She just sounded whiny and, you know, just bratty, really annoying, breaking things. I did feel like I missed a lot of key connections, and I think that might be why I didn't give it a 4-star. I didn't find that not necessarily a lot of things, but quite a few bits that I wanted to make sense didn't. Because of that, I just felt like a lot of things were kind of confusing or clouded, and I couldn't, in that aspect, enjoy it as much as I could have done. As I said, I think it is a rather sad final book. Kind of, without Zaphod and Marvin, you kind of see the gang back, you know, together for one final moment, with the new edition of Random. But it's like, you know, it's like they're saying goodbye, and it's just, I don't know, it's everyone in a certain degree, like each of those characters are just trying to find their place in the galaxy. I'm probably reading way too much into this, but that's how I felt when I was reading the final pages. Like, do they even belong? Like, Arthur, he couldn't find his girlfriend, he couldn't find Fenchurch, and then all of a sudden this kid's been lumbered on him and he doesn't know how to make her happy. He's trying to make himself happy, you know. Ford, he's just continuously travelling. He's got the new Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy Corporation, that new one that's taken over. He's not happy with his job, his life. Trillian, she doesn't know whether she wants to be a galactic news reporter. She doesn't know whether she wants to be working in America. She doesn't know what she wants with her life, and she can't believe in the one thing that she really enjoyed, which was like astrology, because she's seen all of the galaxy, you know. She knows, I guess maybe she doesn't believe it to be true anymore. She's seen much more greater power than that, and that must have broken a part of her, you know, so much that she's built on that just to be broken. Appreciated this final installment, gave it 3.5 stars. Yeah, it was a really good one. So I'm just going to quickly talk about the editions that I read, and they were, as you've seen through the pictures that I've been showing you through this video, they were like the newer editions, and so they've had forewords by some authors, and not necessarily authors, just like people that liked Douglas Adams on a personal level, or you know, like professional level, and like TV writers and stuff like that. And so it was really interesting to see what they had to say about Douglas Adams as a person, but also about, you know, the Hitchhiker's Guide series, you know. And I kind of, it made me appreciate it more, because, you know, you could see that there was so much love and adoration and, you know, just admiration for, is that a word? For the series and the writer, and I don't know, it just gave me that respect, you know, that I might not have necessarily had to the full extent had I not read the forewords. Also, it had the archive original samples. I wasn't so much interested into those, just because I think, had I been someone that had read the series before, or maybe a few times, I would have appreciated it more, but it wasn't interested to me, because I'm not like a fangirl of this series, you know. I don't think, it didn't appeal to me. I flicked through some pieces, but it's just that memorabilia, isn't it, that I think long-time readers and long-time lovers would appreciate more than I did personally. I mean, I can understand the awesomeness of it, it just wasn't for me, so I kind of skimmed through those ones. But just so you know, those editions have that if you're interested, so that's pretty cool. But yeah, although this series gave me a bit of confusion here and there, a bit of what the hell's going on. Completely, I loved it. And I think, let's see, I had 1 3-star book, 1 2-star book, 2 nearly 3 4-star books. So I think overall I'd probably give it a 4 out of 5 stars, based on the majority that I really enjoyed, you know. So definitely a recommended series. Obviously you guys have read this if you've watched this far. I really hope you have read it if you're this far into the video. But now there's something I want to talk about. You know how I mentioned, you probably all know this, but you know how I mentioned how I think Douglas Adams had intended for maybe more stories set in that universe, or, you know, the universe, and he maybe didn't get a chance to in his time, sadly, before he passed. There has been other authors interested. I think Neil Gaiman did like some sort of encyclopedia or something to do with it, like his thoughts on the story or something like that, because he's a big fan. But there is a 6th book, and this is called And Another Thing by Owen Colfer, and I think he did the Artemis Fowl books and some other stuff as well. So I have the synopsis up here if any of you are interested in reading it, if you haven't already. I've put it onto my to be read list on Goodreads, but I don't know how long it will be until I eventually get around to reading it. It might be a good few years. But yeah, it's kind of, I guess, a tribute, but probably with, you know, the same characters and stuff like that, which is really cool. Hopefully it's written in the same wacky style. So in bold it says, an Englishman's continuing search through space and time for a decent cup of tea. Arthur Dent's accidental association with that wholly remarkable book, The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, has not been entirely without incident. Arthur has travelled the length, breadth and depth of known and unknown space. He has stumbled forward and backward through time. He has been blown up, reassembled, cruelly imprisoned, horribly released, and colourfully insulted more than is strictly necessary. Oh, love the part, I can't remember which book it was in, when that guy, that alien guy, just came down to everyone and he was like, Arthur Dent, yeah, you're a bastard, or whatever he said, you know, when he was just insulting him. Oh, amazing. And of course, Arthur Dent has comprehensively failed to grasp the meaning of life, the universe, and everything. Oh yeah, I didn't even mention the meaning of life and all that. That was like the number, the 42, and did they ever find the question? Yeah, I don't know why I didn't talk about that more, but yeah, good stuff. That was like the main plot, I suppose. Anyway, Arthur has finally made it home to Earth, but that does not mean he's escaped his fate. Arthur's chances of getting his hands on a decent cuppa have evaporated rapidly, along with all the world's oceans, for no sooner has he touched down on the planet Earth than he finds out that it is about to be blown up again. And Another Thing is the rather unexpected but very welcome 6th instalment of the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy series. It features a pantheon of unemployed gods, everyone's favourite renegade galactic president, a love-struck green alien, irritating computer, and at least one very large slab of cheese. So I think it's gonna just be another random story, kind of just to add to it, and in appreciation to Douglas Adams and his works. I don't know, I feel like I won't enjoy it as much, just because, I don't know, just because it's not Douglas Adams and that's not his writing, you know, but I will give it a shot whenever I can. Hopefully the library will get it in for me, because that's how I've been reading the other ones, so it'll be random having just this 6th random book without the rest of the series. And yeah, that's that, so that is And Another Thing by Owen Colfer. I think that's it, I think that's all I have to say about this series. I'm sorry it was so rambly, so indecisive in my thoughts and stuff, but but that's the best I could come up with. Let me know what you feel about this series, how many times you've read it maybe, what editions you've had or grown up with. I'd love to know. So yeah, also link me your reviews if you've done any, you'd like me to read them. So thanks very much for watching, and I shall speak to you next time. Goodbye.